Good morning, everyone. We're going to start the March 2nd, 2018 Legislative Committee meeting of the Contractor State License Board. We're going to come to order. My name is Augie Beltran. I'm the chairman of the committee. Linda Clifford, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay.
All right, only board members who are members of the committee may sit at the table. Other board members who are in attendance must observe from the audience. If a quorum of the board is present, those members who are observing cannot participate in the discussion. Now we're going to check for quorum. Chief Jay.
Augie Beltran.
Here.
Linda Clifford.
Here.
David De La Torre.
Here.
Susan Granzella.
Here.
Joan Hancock.
Here.
Michael Layton.
Here.
Thank you, Chief. Next, I'd like to invite everyone at the table to introduce themselves. We'll start with the committee members we'll start with Laura, and then we'll come around the table.
Laura Zuniga, Chief of Licensing.
Rick Lopes, Chief of Public Affairs.
David De La Torre, board member.
Joan Hancock, Board Member.
David Foe, Registrar.
Susan Granzella, board member.
Augie Beltran, board member.
Mike Janetsky, Chief of Legislation.
Mike Layton, Board Member.
Tanya Corcoran, Chief Deputy Registrar.
Christy Shields, Counsel for the Board.
Kayla Bosley, Executive Office.
Thank you. Those in attendance, if you'd like to introduce yourselves, you may feel free to do so. You don't have to. We'll start with Ed Lang. Thank you. And security is provided by CHP. Thank you very much, CHP. I'd like to see you in front of me, not behind me. Okay, public comment for items not on the agenda and future item requests. This item is provided for public comment pertaining to items on the agenda as well as items not on the agenda. However, the committee cannot discuss or take any action on items not listed on the agenda. The CSLB welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda at its CSL and is, I need new glasses. These either work or they don't. And it is CSLB's intent to ask for public comment prior to the committee taking action on any agenda item. But if for some reason we forget to ask for public comment on the agenda item, a member of the public desiring to comment on the item should raise their hand and they will be recognized. Also, to allow this committee sufficient time to conduct its scheduled business, we will be limiting public comment to 5 minutes per person. Are there any comments from the committee at this time? Yes.
I'm just wondering, in general, have we ever had an explanation of an opposing or statement in opposition or statement in support when staff supports or opposes a proposal? Have we ever had just what the other side has suggested or why? I know we have the existing law and we're trying to improve upon it, but I'm not sure.
I think what you're asking is...
I think it's a Christie question.
Okay, but I think, I think what you're asking is staff gives us a suggestion on whether we should oppose or support or whatever And does the other side have the opportunity to give us that same
In our packets.
in our packets?
So we have some sort of advance
Go ahead, Christie.
awareness.
The way that committees typically work is the staff will analyze the bill. They'll explain who's for it or against it, if there is a record of who's currently opposing or supporting it. So you'll see who's opposing and supporting it. And then the staff make a recommendation from their perspective. Now, that doesn't mean that that needs to be the motion for the board. One of the things some of my other clients do is they will actually give you the different options for positions on a bill, so you can maybe have other ideas for what you may or may not want to do on it. And then when the item's presented, anyone that has a differing position can certainly raise it during the public comment period.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Are there any questions from the public at this time? Thank you. Item C, update and discussion on CSLB's previously approved 2018 legislative proposals. In the packet on page 9 is an introduction of 4 legislative proposals CSLB sponsored this year. They were approved by the full board at the December 7th, 2017 meeting. Legislative Chief Mike Jemnetsky, we lovingly calling him Chief J, will provide an update on the status of these bill ideas in the legislature. Chief?
Yes, so the bill introduction deadline was in February the 16th, and we are happy to state that we got 3 of our 4 ideas introduced in the legislature. The first one was to remove the registrar's authority to accept the cash deposit in lieu of a contractor's bond, and that's going to be presented by Assemblymember Bro. On a spot bill, it's going to be AB 3126 sometime in the coming weeks. The authority to hold informal citation conferences will be authored, has been authored by Senator Monning. It's SB 1042. And the statute of limitations for unlicensed contractors who fail to carry workers' comp, that's going to be authored by Assemblymember Holden. It's AB 2705. And then we were unable to secure authorship for our multiple qualifier, bond of qualifying individual idea. So at this point, we actually believe we have some options to work with the licensing division this year to implement existing statutes that we have to review the qualifications of contractors as they submit their application and maybe strengthen up our intent in that area.
Any questions from the board on this report? Any questions from the public on this report? Thank you. Moving to item D, review, discussion, and possible action on 2017-2018 pending legislation. Page 26, SB 721 Hill, 2017 legislative cycle, contractors, decks and balconies inspection. This bill requires building owners to schedule inspections of exterior elevated elements in buildings containing 3 or more multifamily units. The board took a watch position on this bill at the June 2017 board meeting, if you'll all recall. Staff now recommends a support position. Chief, take it from there.
Sure. Last night, we did receive a letter of support in support of SB 721, authored by Graystar Management. The letter is on the back table, and it's a one-page letter that's been distributed for the members today, and it's just for consideration. The staff does now recommend a support position. While the bill does place its requirements in the contractor's law, it does not impose any direct requirements on the contractor's board. However, we do believe this would be an effective consumer protection tool that would provide CSLB further opportunity to work with local agencies about building codes and permit requirements as it relates to contractors.
At this time, starting on my right, are there any questions from the board? On my left, are there any questions from the board? Anyone from the public? Yes, Counselor.
I just thought that maybe, not to take away from the idea of it's a good consumer protection concept potentially, I was wondering if we could explore with the author why there needs to be an amendment to our law when it doesn't actually directly impact contractors. If you look at the statutory amendment, it's proposing an amendment to the contractor state license law in the civil code. And you do enforce violations of the civil code, so there would be an enforcement mechanism if it was just in the civil code. I just wondered why they felt it needed to be in our law if it's,
We'll take that into consideration.
Okay.
Chief Jay, when you're working with staff, go ahead and work on, mention that. Any comments from the public? At this time, I'll bring it back. Is there a motion to support SB 721?
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. Once again, on the question from board members, on my left, on my right. Anyone from the public? Very well, let's call roll. Will that be you, Karen? Oh, I'm sorry, Karen?
Kayla.
Kayla, nice to meet you.
Nice to
Karen's in
meet
the
you.
back.
Okay, so Augie Beltran,
Aye.
Linda Clifford. Aye. David De La Torre.
Aye.
Susan Granzella.
Aye.
Joan Hancock.
Abstain for those reasons Christie verbalized.
Okay, and Michael Layton.
And the result?
Motion carries.
So if for the record, how many ayes?
There are five. Five
How many
ayes and one
nays?
abstain. One.
one abstain.
One did?
Abstain,
No,
there's no nays.
I get it. I'm, a little education here. Okay, so when we call for the question, we call the vote, and you can do the roll call vote.
Okay.
So then you'll say, motion carries.
Motion carries.
There were how many ayes?
Five ayes.
How many nays?
No, none.
Don't, it's okay. And how many abstentions?
One.
Thank you. That way it's TV land and everybody else has got it. All right, now we have page 41, SB 981, Dodd, Legislative Cycle 2018, Home Solicitation, Contract Offers, Water Treatment, Contractor Responsibilities. The bill authorizes the delivery and installation of a water treatment device or other materials during the consumer's 3-day right to rescind period. The 3-day right to rescind a contract or cooling off period is a consumer protection measure that allows the buyer to cancel the agreement without penalty or obligation within the rescission period. Chief.
So I would note at the outset on page 42 of our packet, it does say oppose. I would state for the board today, we'd like to change that to oppose unless amended. When this came up, we did speak to the author's office about our concerns. And we do look forward to working with the authors and the sponsors. I believe one of the sponsors is here today in a manner that's appropriate for all involved. I can answer any questions about the bill, but at this point, yeah, we're going to change it to oppose unless amended.
Very good. So staff recommendation is oppose unless amended, allowing us the ability to work with the senator's office. Any questions on my right from board members? Yes.
So do you have a specific issue of amendment that you've identified?
I think one issue that could make the idea more palatable for the Contractor State License Board would be to enhance any punishments that would be meted against unlicensed contractors who install these systems within or outside of the 3 days, because apparently it's a rampant issue, rampant enough that an idea was proposed. So that could be one idea for a possible amendment.
Any follow-ups on that? No?
Yes. No.
Okay.
Chair, so is it ripe for us to support this piece of legislation? Are we ready? Because it seems like you said one of the things that we might,
So
Bring up
staff
as-
recommended.
I'm not finished. So
Well,
one of the
you asked a
thing-
question. So the question was, staff recommended oppose unless amended. That's what I'm understanding.
All right. And my concern is that it's not ripe for any decision of support or opposition if we haven't discussed the amendment.
Well,
Or
that's-
amendments. Is there
So,
more than one?
board member, as you know, this is a legislative committee, and this is your opportunity to discuss this.
Is there more than one amendment that you are considering, Michael?
Well,
not you, Michael, is there more than one amendment that you're considering?
I don't know if this has evolved to the point where we're considering amendments. This bill is in its infancy. It was just introduced mid-February. It's not been heard by any committees yet. We just got the fact sheet from the author's office. There's no direct opposition on record. So it's here now for us to consider the issues. And the issue is, to the extent it appears to be there might be some consumer protection concerns by allowing an installation within the 3-day cooling off period. That period is reserved for consumers to consider the contract that they've just signed without having any action imposed on their property. This would abrogate that idea and allow installation within those 3 days. So the board is here to consider whether they should oppose unless amend.
And any amendments would come back to this body, correct? Or the full body?
Correct.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
And the reason for that has to do with the BMP code with regard to the waivers of the 3-day notice being pertinent only to issues where there's an emergency situation. Isn't that correct? And this is not, these installations are not emergent.
Well, correct. The 3-day right to rescind cannot be waived volitionally by the consumer unless there's an emergency and there's a series of steps that have to occur before the waiver would be valid. This bill would allow, just for the installation of the water treatment systems, the consumer to volitionally allow the installation to occur within 3 days and then allow it to be removed upon request, and the contractor would bear that expense. The concern of the board is that it places undue obligation on the consumer. If it's installed within the 3 days, then they have to consider removing an installation that occurred within their period to consider whether they wanted it done at all.
Thank you.
Anything else from the board? From the public, anyone like to speak? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board, committee, Chief Jay, and members of the public. My name is Josiah Young. I represent the Pacific Water Quality Association, who are the sponsors of SB 981. Kind of along the lines of what Mrs. Hancock indicated, we're here today to ask for the opportunity to further discuss this bill, and we're requesting that you take a watch position in the interim. I understand that this will go before the full board, potentially in April, and I understand that it is the duty of this legislative committee to take a position. However, without yet being able to engage and being able to bring in some of our experts and stakeholders, we feel that a watch position would be appropriate action for the committee today. Briefly, this bill does include substantial additional consumer protections with the contractors bearing the cost to remove any systems, and the rights of the consumer to rescind have been left untouched within this bill. They still have the opportunity to rescind the contract within the 3 days per the code. Second of all, it does level the playing field, as mentioned, whereby currently unlicensed operators are putting consumers at risk and competing with licensed operators by illegally installing the water treatment systems before this 3-day period. Consumers don't have a legitimate option to turn to if they would like to volitionally select to install the water treatment system. And the last point I have is that, this legislation was initially passed about 30 years ago. Times have changed with the rise of the internet and such. There's so much information out there to inform consumers, and ultimately what this bill is doing is giving consumers more legal options in making informed water treatment decisions. They can decide when to install. If they don't like it, it comes out, and the contractors bear the risk. So thank you for the opportunity for me to speak today, and my client would be more than happy to discuss in detail some of the other concerns, some potential amendments. We want to keep working with the committee and the board to ensure that we have a bill that protects consumers and levels the playing field, and until we have that opportunity to fully engage, we urge you to take a watch position today. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Richard Markson for the Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors of California. We agree. We believe the appropriate position would be to watch the measure, and although PHCC hasn't taken a formal position on this measure, we are committed to working with the author, with your staff, and with the sponsors to ensure that the consumer is protected. Obviously, as licensed contractors, we're very interested in additional penalties that might accrue against an unlicensed contractor who's engaging in these behaviors. We are fully committed to working to resolve the issues and protecting the consumer rights. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public wish to say anything? Okay, we're going to bring it back to the board, committee. As it seems, you have an option. So one of you brave souls can make the motion.
I'd like to move that we maintain.
I'm not done. You can choose to support, you can choose to oppose, you can choose to watch, or you can choose to oppose unless amended. What's your favor?
I'd like to move that we maintain a watch position on this Dodd bill, SB 981.
Is there a second? Second. There's a motion, a second. On the board, any questions? Yes.
Yes, part of the problem that I have with the way the bill is worded right now is that it's fine to have the contractor come and remove, but they need to put the existing water system back. They need to repair any contracting impacts. I mean, just to have somebody come in and take the system out and leave the homeowner, is the homeowner left with no system at this point? Because it doesn't say they have to put the other one back. And is the homeowner left with construction impacts from that? It's just removing it, to me, is not enough. So I'm really uncomfortable not having more verbiage that says not only will they remove the system, but because the contractor is taking the risk. There is a 3-day deal, and if the homeowner option is, well, I can have you remove it, but then I have no water system and a bunch of damage to my house, is that really a fair option for the homeowner? So I'm not really comfortable not having more.
Linda,
I
are you
really
looking
definitely think
for-
it needs to be amended, not just watched.
Do you want to hear more from industry, or do you want to hear from staff, or is that just kind of a
I want
thinking out
staff
loud?
to know that I'm not comfortable with the wording and an amendment. I would only support it if there was further language protecting the homeowner, bringing their home back to so there really is a risk if the contractor does. It's not going to just take out its system, it's going to put the homeowner's home back to where it would have been had they taken their 3 days and changed their mind.
Thank you. Anything else from the board?
Yes, Mike Layton.
Yeah.
Under the watch, we're not supporting and we're not opposing.
We're
Is this
just looking.
correct? We're just holding water. Because from where I sit at, I'm not in favor of even a watch if we don't maintain the 3-day cooling off period. And that is unless it is an emergency. Most of these home installations are non-emergency. As the staff has mentioned, they're high advertising. The contractors come in and they really put the pressure on me to do so. And once it's installed in my home, the chances are 99% of the time that it will not be restalled back to the original condition. They start coming in and gutting my walls and putting in this system, and then I cool off and I want it taken out. It's just not a viable point for me if we're considering removing the 3-day. So if we're going to maintain that 3-day period, I'm in agreement with the watch. If we're not, I'm opposed. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else from the board? Okay, there's a motion on the floor to watch. Is there anything from the public? Anything else you'd like to contribute? Now's your time. Okay, we're going to bring it back. We're going to call the question.
Chair, before you call the question, can I amend my motion to watch as long as the 3-day wait period, cooling up period is maintained? I'd like to amend my motion.
Okay, Christie, now I know you can amend a motion, but,
The second has to agree.
right, no, I get that, but what I'm asking is, or maybe Chief or Laura, so if we do watch, but we want it, as long as there's like that 3-day thing, right? We should still have the ability to work with the senator's office, right? But tell me if we were to do oppose unless amended, does that give us a little more stroke to work with the senator's office?
I mean, it really depends on how the board wants to approach it, I think. You know, you've had the sponsor come here today and say that they're willing to work with you to address the board's concerns. It is very early in the legislative process. I think, I personally would say it would be better to take a watch position. You've stated your concerns for the record and let me know what direction you'd like the bill to go. The board's going to meet in April, and at that point, if the bill hasn't been amended to the board's satisfaction, it would be a good time to take an opposed position or oppose unless amended. But also because there's not defined amendments you're looking for, I think that makes oppose unless amended a little bit challenging.
Okay, so there is an amendment to the motion. Does the person who made the second agree to the
I
amendment?
accept the amendment, yes.
Okay. Now, any questions on the amendment? Yes.
I just want to clarify that traditionally, the 3-day cooling off period was that nothing could be installed until after the third day passed. This would change that to allow the installation to occur during those 3 days. So if you're talking about a cooling off period, what it's changing it to is that you can have it removed at their expense during the 3-day period. So it's changing it from a no installation to an allowing the installation, but requiring them to remove it. So it's not really a cooling off, it's just you have recourse legally to require them to remove it at their expense within those 3 days. That's the difference.
Okay.
So just so that the board members understand what it truly the legal impact would be.
So based on the counselor's advice, does anyone on the board have any questions? Back to the public. Yes.
My understanding would be it could not be installed within that 3-day period. Not cooling off, not installed within that 3-day period.
That's the current law, but this proposal would change that
And
to
that's-
allow it to be installed.
And that's what I'm opposed.
Okay. Fair enough. We understand that. You want to say something? Go ahead. Come on up.
Thank you for the opportunity to do it again. I would agree with the counselor's.
Turn on the mic.
Pardon me.
Yeah.
I agree with the counselor's assertion about the way that the law is changing. The only thing that I would hope to add in your making decisions on the watch position, first of all, echoes the comments made by the woman, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name, Zuniga, at the end of the board. The watch position, we still, whatever position you all determine to take today, we want to be fully engaged to kind of ensure that as this bill goes through the legislative process, we're able to hear your concerns and attempt to address them. And that's why I'm here today, is not to argue about the actual merits of the law or the, watch period or whatever, cooling off period, but just to say, take a position so that we can continue to engage with you all before an official decision is made. But with respect to the 3-day cooling off period, the right of rescission is completely intact in this law. The consumer has the protection that they may say, take this out and you're paying for it. The key element from our position is that the homeowner, the consumer, makes the decision as to when the installation happens. So if that consumer wants that installation to happen on day one, they can choose to do so. Under the current law, they're not allowed to do so. And that's what we're trying to give the consumer, that additional choice, with the protection that if they decide they don't want it, they still can pull out.
Thank you. Anything else from the public? Okay, we're going to call the question. Kayla, roll call vote, please.
Augie Beltran?
No.
Linda Clifford?
No.
David De La Torre?
Aye.
Susan Granzella?
No.
Joan Hancock?
Aye.
Michael Layton?
Aye.
Okay, so the
We're-
motion fails. 3 noes and 3 ayes in favor.
So even though we have a deadlock, motion does not carry.
Yeah, you have to have a majority one way or the other.
Okay, so the chair would call upon another motion. Michael, would you like to make a motion? No. Anyone else? Anyone else like to make a motion? Someone's got to step up. Chair can't make a motion.
So I'll make an attempt to make a motion. I'm thinking. I'll make a motion that, and in all deference to Laura, that we oppose unless amended, and that staff has heard our very vigorous concerns today, and they take those to heart in their discussions with the bill's proponents. That's my motion.
Can I just get clarification, so staff have specific direction? So would you want them to address the issues that you discussed regarding the fact that they should not only have to remove it, but restore the prior system and address any damage that may be caused by the removal or installation?
And I also think there's a time period, because the contractor can say, yes, I'll come and move it, but it's going to be 6 months because I'm busy putting everybody else's in. I mean, there's a lot of pitfalls in walking away. I definitely understand that if somebody wants to have the system put in right away because they do have a problem, and they're not pressured by the salesperson, right? They really believe that they want to have good water immediately. I get that. And so I leave it to the proponents and staff to figure out how to address our concerns and possibly create that window of opportunity for consumers that still fully protects them. So I guess that's where I'm at.
Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of a second?
Second.
Okay, motion doesn't die. On the question from the board, anything on my left? Anything on my right?
Yeah, where are we at with this? I mean, in regards to the staff recommendations to oppose it?
So so it's to follow staff recommendation, and then Linda made some comments to guide staff in their endeavor to help write this bill.
Right, but it still circles back to the 3-day period.
And that's a concern that I think was
And we're
echoed
opposed
in
to
there.
that.
We are opposed to
that's-
installing within the 3-day period.
Right.
Or is it, we're not opposed to installing within the 3-day period as long as it's restored?
It seems to me, and as soon as I'm done talking, one of you can come in and correct me, that we are opposed to installing within the 3 days. That's what I am assuming. Unless that is amended, we're going to continue to oppose. Now, staff, I believe, is going to work with the senator's office and with Josiah over there, and maybe they can massage something that they can bring back to us in June or April, thank you. And then we can further discuss it at the big board, and then we can change to watch, support, hard oppose, leave it like it is. That's what I'm assuming. Anybody think differently? Yeah.
What if, Linda, and Susan, what if we change the wording of this? And this was the trouble I had last night or yesterday when I talked to Michael, is that final paragraph on page 41, it seems like it's two separate sentences. And the first one, I would be in opposition to, which is this bill would authorize the delivery and installation of the treatment system or device during the rescission period. So, I mean, I would be in favor of opposing that, and that we just delete the second sentence altogether. It kind of takes care of the problem, doesn't it?
Well, I think that's going to be up to the senator to decide because it's his bill. So we can offer our suggestions that we've commented on today through staff, and they will explain to the senator how we feel, and then it's going to be up to him to decide what words get changed and what words stay. Now,
Sure.
anybody knows in a legislative session that a bill is like alphabet soup. It starts out could be a paragraph when it starts out at the beginning of the session, and it could be a 4-page bill by the time it ends, by the time everybody's throwing stuff in and out of it.
Chair, I'd
Yes.
like to respond to what I think Joan's thought is. I really appreciate the legislative analysis that we get. It's really helpful. However, in this case, on page 44, it's very clear how the proposed change is being put, and we can read that very clearly, and I'm not happy with this. I'm not supporting the language that they are proposing in the bill on page 44. And I think we've made that clear that we're not supporting this language. So my motion is very clearly, we are opposing this language as it stands today. And without substantive amendments that address the issue that they've brought up, but address our concerns, which have been broadly described here, I think, it's a continue to oppose. And that's what my motion is.
Oppose unless amended.
Unless amended, but I'm not amending it at this point.
All right, Chief?
I think on that point, if the objection is that we don't want to install during the cooling off period, that is the entire concept of the bill. So I think at this point, it would be an oppose and maintain the status quo of the law as it is. That's what I'm hearing.
Thank you,
Because I
Chief.
don't know that there's an amendment that would overcome the concept behind the idea.
Well, we have a motion and a second on the floor, so we'll take the vote. It'll either go up or down, then we can take another motion if we need to. So, Kayla, please.
Yeah. Augie Beltran,
Aye.
Linda Clifford,
Aye.
David De La Torre,
Nay.
Susan Granzella,
Aye.
Joan Hancock,
I'm afraid if I say nay, I'm supporting the first sentence. And so I'm saying aye, I guess.
okay. Michael
This is
Layton.
Aye.
Okay, so motion carries with 5 ayes and 1 no.
Thank you. All right, we move on to page 45, SB 1042 Mawning, Legislative Cycle 2018, Contractors Violations, Failure to Secure Workers' Compensation, Statute of Limitations. This CSLB-sponsored bill makes the registrar's authority to host settlement conferences explicit rather than implicit by formalizing its existing citation conference process. The board approved the legislative proposal at the December 2017 board meeting. Staff recommends a support position. Remember, it is our bill. So, on my left, any questions? On my right? Anything from the public? I would entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
For?
Second.
Motion for support?
Motion for support, I'm sorry.
There's a motion and a second. Kayla, please, I'm sorry. Any questions from the board? Any questions from the public?
I had a question.
Yes. Which page?
Page 45. Let's see here. Does this bill give the cited person only 15 days to make this request? That's what I'm concerned about, is whether there's enough time.
The existing law provides that they only have 15 days to appeal, which may be extended by the registrar for good cause. So that part is not changing. This would allow, upon that appeal, when that right is executed, it would allow CSLE staff to work with the cited person to determine if they just want an informal conference to
Okay.
deal with a payment plan or reduce penalties. It wouldn't impair their right to an administrative hearing on the merits.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Based on those comments, any question from the public? All right, Kayla.
Augie Beltran,
Aye.
Linda Clifford,
Aye.
David De La Torre,
Aye.
Susan Granzella,
Aye.
Joan Hancock,
Aye.
Michael Layton.
Aye.
Okay, so motion carries 6 ayes.
Thank you. Page 50, AB 2483, Volpel, Legislative Cycle 2018, Department of Consumer Affairs, Office of Supervision of Occupational Boards. This bill establishes a supervising office within the Department of Consumer Affairs to ensure its covered agencies adhere to established licensing and enforcement policies. The new office will have the authority to review investigations and appeals of DCA boards, including those of CSLB. What do you got, Chief?
So the recommendation in the packet is to oppose, and that remains the recommendation. We did reach out to the author's office and did get a background sheet, and we did speak to DCA as well. DCA has not taken any positions on any current bills this year. So at that point, the staff recommendation remains as is, and I can also answer any questions about the bill if there are any.
Did you enclose the fact sheet for the board?
The fact sheet's not enclosed, but the summary in the bill analysis, which is on the back table, as well as with the members now, really does encompass the short fact sheet, which it's in response to the Little Hoover convening on the issue of licensing being a barrier to the marketplace. That appears to be the motivation behind the bill, and to lessen what those barriers might be. The issue with this, well, there's a number of issues with this bill, which we can discuss if anybody has any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Christie, did you want to say something?
I just want to point out that on page 51 of the text, you'll see that it would propose to enact new policies regarding enforcement and licensing.
Can you give the line, please?
If you start at line 8 on page 51, it says, occupational licensing laws should be construed and applied to increase economic opportunity, promote competition, and encourage innovation. That conflicts with your current B&P Code Section 7000.6, which says that consumer protection is the highest priority. So my concern is that this entire bill proposal seems to be geared towards increasing competition instead of protecting consumers, which is our primary mission. So that, for me, was a big flag. And of course, the way that it's written, it's really unclear how things like, for instance, on page 52, it says that in exercising active supervision, if you look at line 3, the office shall play a substantial role in the development of rules and policies. I'm not sure even what that means. It's very vague and unclear as to how this would work, how it would operate with current existing laws and hearing rights under the Administrative Procedure Act when it comes to enforcement. So anyway, there's a lot of issues with the bill, but to me, those were the biggest flags from a legal perspective.
Thank you, Counselor. Anything from the board on my right? Anything on the left? Anything from the public on this comment? Board, what's your pleasure?
Move to oppose.
Second.
It's a motion to oppose. On the question, from the board? From the public? Kayla?
Augie Beltran,
Aye.
Linda Clifford,
Aye.
David De La Torre,
Aye.
Susan Granzella,
Aye.
Joan Hancock,
Aye.
Michael Layton.
Aye.
Okay, so motion carries 6 ayes.
Thank you. AB 2705, Holden, Legislative Cycle 2018, Contractors Violations, Failure to Secure Workers' Compensation, Statute of Limitations. This is a CSLB-sponsored bill, extends a 2-year statute of limitations to unlicensed contractors for failing to provide workers' compensation coverage. The board approved the legislative proposal at the December 2017 meeting. Staff recommends a support position. From the board? From the public? What's your pleasure?
Move to support.
Second.
There's a motion to second to support. Once again, from the board? From the public? Kayla?
Augie Beltran,
Aye.
Linda Clifford,
Aye.
David De La Torre,
Aye.
Susan Granzella,
Aye.
Joan Hancock,
Aye.
Michael Layton.
Aye.
Okay, so motion carries 6 ayes.
Thank you. Okay, Chief is going to give us an update on 2017-2018 enacted legislation.
Yes, these are all bills that went into effect this year that the board has been apprised on the last many months. This is just a status update. AB 1070 requires the Contractors Board, in consultation with the Public Utilities Commission, to come up with a solar disclosure document. We have distributed a draft of what would be the first page of that disclosure, not considering any of the addendums in the statute. It is just for the board's review and kind of a status update. No decision is being made on it. AB 1278, this did allow for the purpose of automatic license suspension for a contractor's failure to comply with a unsatisfied civil judgment. We are able to change the time period as to when the board imposes that suspension from the date it was before, which was the date that the judgment went down, when any personnel could have left, to the date that the underlying acts that led to the judgment had the status of the license at that time. So really, it's an IT issue for CSLB, and we're imposing those changes now. And the AB 1284, that is a licensing program that will be administered by the Department of Business Oversight under the California financing laws. It's not a CSLB program, but it regards the PACE program, and it would require a licensing program for solicitor agents and program administrators that sell assessment contracts to the public that involve PACE financing. CSLB is involved to the extent that solicitor agents need to be licensed or registered as HIS home improvement salespeople. We have the tools in place to disclose the status of our licensees, so we're just moving forward with working with DBO about what they need from us. And then the last issue was SB 486, which was a CSLB-sponsored bill, the letter of admonishment. The Enforcement Division plans to have that program complete and in implementation by June. And that is the update on the bills that we've been watching this year.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions from the committee?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, not a question, just wanted to say, in each case where we supported amendment, I just want to thank the staff for going and getting the amendments that we wanted. Good job, and so that we could fully support these bills and get them in place. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anything else from the committee? From the public?
Good morning, Bernadette Del Caro, Executive Director of the California Solar and Storage Association. I just want to reference our full support of AB 1070, the Consumer Protection Bill, for disclosure documents, and just reiterate our desire to work with the staff on commenting on the drafts and working with you to develop the best product. We were in full support of the bill, and this is a top priority for us. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anything else from the public? This was an informational agenda item, so we now move to F, 2016-18 Strategic Plan Update, discussion and possible action on 2017-18 legislative objectives. Turning this over to the chief. Chief, real quick, you're only looking for a motion on item 3.3, am I correct?
More or less, yeah. We're going to change some of the language because we've updated some of these items on page 73.
Okay, that was just for my clarification.
Sure.
So go ahead and start from the top.
Sure. So we are on page 73 of the packet. On item 3.1, the need for this has been reexamined. This would have been to reorganize entirely the contractor's state license law, which would have required extensive legislative changes and possible cross-reference issues and other codes. Folks know our laws and they know them by section number. So rather than undertake this project, we're proposing now to enhance our search capabilities on our webpage to make these laws more accessible and easier to find. And so that's an amendment to this 3.1 idea. Item 3.2, we're just going to change the date from February 2018 to June 8, 2018. The status section has been updated. Item 3.3, we're going to change from February 2018 to June 18. And this is just going to change from what it currently reads to undergoing staff review rather than legal review. And then item 3.3, June 2017, we're going to change to February 2018. So I think really the only consideration for the board is whether the idea on 3.1 of, rather than changing the contractor's law and how it's organized, to support the staff's idea to make it more user-friendly on the website and possibly look at this book here.
Do we need a motion for that, Counselor? Okay. So taking item 3.1 on the advice of Chief Jay, Chair would accept the motion for the changes.
So moved.
So motion is second. On the question from, yes, Linda.
So what's the time frame? Is the time frame still June 2018?
Yes.
And I think you said move 3.3 from June to February, but isn't it really February to June?
That's an excellent point.
I was confused. The yellow actually means something to me, so, okay, thank you.
Anything else from the board? Anything from the public? Bringing it back on, Kayla?
Augie Beltran,
Aye.
Linda Clifford,
Aye.
David De La Torre,
Aye.
Susan Granzella,
Aye.
Joan Hancock, Michael Layton. Okay, so motion carries 6 ayes.
Thank you. Chief, anything else?
Nope.
Motion to adjourn.
There's a motion to, oh,
I'm sure, Richard Marcus, and I'm sure Chief Jay will have this on your next agenda, but I would encourage the committee to consider AB 2138 by Assemblymember Chu. This would deny any board under the Department of Consumer Affairs the ability to deny a license to an applicant based solely upon their criminal record. So I think particularly in instances where a contractor or one of your regulated persons is dealing with cash or payments or entering, a consumer's property, that might present some particular problems for the contractors board.
thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Just because of that, are there any other questions or comments from the public? We can't take any action on it, of course. Would the board like to say anything on the way out? Okay, there was a motion to adjourn. Was there a second behind that? Did we forget to make any motions on these dates? No, we're good, right? Okay. So is there a second to the motion to adjourn? You guys don't want to leave?
Seriously?
I guess we're not adjourning. Okay, thank you. There's a motion and a second to adjourn.
Now, if you
Kayla?
don't know, it's going to be really weird.
Augie Beltran,
No. Aye. I
Linda
changed it.
Clifford,
Aye.
David De La Torre,
Aye.
Susan Granzella,
Aye.
Joan Hancock, Michael Layton. Okay, so motion carries.
Thank you, everyone. Good job, Kayla. Thanks. Thank you, Chief.
So
AB 2038, that sounds kind of...
We're going to start in a moment. We're waiting for one person. All right. Good morning. Good morning. This is the March 2nd, 2018 meeting of the Contractor State License Board's Public Affairs Committee will now come to order. We're kind of like the good news finale, so I wanted to prep you on that. I'm Susan Granzella, the committee's chair. Please note that only board members who are on this committee are here at the table. Other board members observe from the audience. Also, if a quorum of the board is present, those members not on the Public Affairs Committee cannot participate in our discussion. Claire Goldstein, can you please call roll and check for a quorum?
Sure. Susan Granzella. Here. Augie Beltran.
We're here.
Linda Clifford.
Aye.
David De La Torre.
Here.
Joan Hancock.
Here.
Michael Layton. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Next, we'd like to do some self-introductions of the committee members and staff. We'll start to my left with Kayla.
Kayla Bosley, Executive Office.
Christy Shields, counsel for the board.
Tanya Corcoran, Chief Deputy Registrar for the board.
Mike Layton, board member.
Clifford, board member.
Rick Lopes, Chief of Public Affairs.
Susan Granzella, board member.
Augie Beltran, board member.
David Foe, registrar.
Joan Hancock, board member.
David De La Torre, board member.
Mike Jameski, Chief of Legislation.
Laura Zuniga, Chief of Licensing.
Claire Goldstein, Public Affairs.
Thank you. I'd like to start the meeting with some comments from the chair here, and Rick and I worked on these, but I wanted to make sure, especially this year, that we acknowledge the work of the staff. I want to start this morning by taking a moment to offer my thanks to a number of people for their hard work and contributions over the past few months, longer than few months, actually, to our consumer protection efforts. We'll hear about more of these efforts as we move through our agenda. But one thing I did want to add, when I first met with the Public Affairs Committee, I was still trying to quantitative and analyze what was the task that we were still in the middle of the disaster season. And the magnitude, one of the things I learned was that we were going from an average of 3 counties impacted and requiring all our continued support to 12 this year. So it changed everything. So we moved forward in being able to announce, some of the things that the staff has done, all of the support, but it was very important. Most notably, I'd like to thank everyone involved in our disaster response, especially CSLB staff who spent countless hours, and that's an understatement, I think, working at assistance centers, posting signs in disaster areas, making presentations to survivors and contractors, working with local building departments and conducting sting and sweep operations, as well as all those here in our Sacramento headquarters who supported those efforts. We want to make a special thanks to our colleague, fellow board member Nancy Springer. She is not here today, but we still want to acknowledge her efforts. As many of you know, Nancy is the chief building official in Butte County and one of the most among the most respected building officials in the state. Her county was particularly affected this past year with 3 devastating wildfires. Even with her commitments to her county, Nancy found time to work closely with our public affairs staff to develop a rebuilding workshop program, one targeted to survivors, the other to licensed contractors. Nancy also attended the first 2 workshops in Yuba County and is hosting CSLB for 2 workshops planned later this month in Butte County. Her insight and expertise have proved valuable to staff, and I know I speak for my fellow committee members in thanking Nancy for her continued commitment to California consumers. And last, I wanted to say a big thank you to Rick and to his team for keeping me informed, for all of their hard work. When I was able to come in and we were meeting, there was always a disaster kind of update at that point and what everyone was doing next, like getting in cars and packing things up, and being able to organize the information with all of the disaster areas. So it was an incredible event for all of California this year, and I think CSLB did a great job in responding to that. It was also the efforts of the other CSLB staff, and that would be enforcement, and that would be everyone else who responded to support the consumers. So that's my spiel. And I wanted to say thank you again to Rick. Do any other committee members have any general comments at this time? All right, any public comment on this agenda item? All right, thank you. Next is Agenda Item B, Public Comment and Requests for Future Agenda Items. This item is where the public can comment on items on the agenda as well as items not on the agenda. Please note the committee cannot take any action on items not listed on the agenda. CSLB welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda, and it's my intent to ask for public comment prior to the committee taking action on any agenda item. So if you want to speak about a specific agenda item, you may want to wait until we get to that item. If for some reason I forget to ask for public comment on an agenda item, any member of the public who wants to comment should raise their hand and I'll recognize them. Also, we'll be limiting public comment to 5 minutes per individual. At this time, are there any members of the public who would like to address the committee? And that's no. Okay. Moving on. Agenda item C. The next agenda item is our public affairs update, and for that, we turn over to Rick, but should I call you Mr. L? I don't know. I'm thinking in keeping with all the committees, so.
It just doesn't have that same ring.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, so we'll bag that. So,
No,
thank you, Rick.
Rick is fine. Thank you, Susan. We are going to begin on page 85 in the program. Since we do have some new members on our committee, I'll go into a tiny bit more depth as I go through things, just so you have a good understanding of how the Public Affairs Office works, how we fit into everything that goes on with the board. As you can see on 85, as far as staffing, our Public Affairs Office is staffed with 6 full-time positions, and we have 1 part-time student assistant. On page 85 is the highlights begin. You see the website statistics. Nothing really of note to point out to you. Things are kind of continuing per normal. In January, you can see that we had 804,000 sessions. You can look back to the number of sessions throughout the year, and you can see that that's average. In December, because of the holidays, it goes down. It's picked back up, and you see our 12-month average is 734,000. So it'll bounce back and forth between that. As you look over to page 86, we have our 25 most viewed pages. The only thing of note is there really isn't a lot of change to this. The top 9 have not changed over the last year. They might move a position or two and around, but the main things that people come to our website for really haven't changed. And just be aware, this does not include our online searches or instant license check, any of that kind of thing. These are the other pages. Far and away, the online license checks are our biggest hits, the biggest reason people come into our website. So we've kind of pulled that out. So this is the other information they come to our website for. And you can see, again, at least the top 9 haven't really changed at all over the last year. On 87, with the public meetings, we do our live webcasts. Not only of our meetings, you can see in the pictures there, there's Nancy, who Susan referred to a few moments ago. That was her speaking to the group at one of the wildfire workshops that we did in Loma Rica, which is in Yuba County back in January. Moving on to page 88, as we move into our social media highlights. I'll just note towards the bottom of the page, you see the graphics there. Our staff has done a great job of coming up with graphics. And luckily, we have millennials on our staff that really help us, because this doesn't necessarily mean a lot to me, but it really affects the people's interaction and people's ability and willingness to click on things, is when there's graphics and there are things that are a little bit more interactive with them. And so our staff has done a great job about doing that and getting more interaction, and that's really worked out well. On page 89, I will just note the Nextdoor partnership. I have mentioned this at previous meetings. We'll mention it a little bit more as we talk about the disaster outreach later, but this is, I believe, long-term going to prove to be one of our most valuable partnerships. It began specifically because of our disaster outreach, and you can see we are limited in the number of counties we can reach out to, but the Contractors Board is the second state agency that's been allowed to partner with Nextdoor. We reached out to them probably more than a year ago, and at that point they weren't ready to go beyond just allowing local city and county government agencies, but we planted the seeds with them, and then when the disasters came into play, the Office of Emergency Services became the first state agency, and we became the second state agency to be able to have a partnership with them. And as you can see, in January, our total subscribers through our Nextdoor is up over 571,000. So that we expect to grow, as hopefully we'll be able to expand into additional counties. Not a lot to really touch on over the next couple of pages. You can see the different social media outreach things that we're doing. I will refer you next to page 92 in our email alert feature. We've had this in place now for almost 8 years. This is where people can actually go and sign up to receive various different email alerts. You can see since the December board meeting, it's a fairly steady growth at this point, 264 new ones signing up. So we have 27,000 people who've signed up for our various email alerts. We also give our licensees the option on their renewals and on their applications to provide us with an email address. You can see we have 146,000 plus email addresses from our licensees out of the 280,000. So we actually have the list where we can actually reach out to these licensees through emails as well. On 93, you can see the media calls. Those fluctuate on a monthly basis. At the bottom of 93, in our media events, you can see that we have conducted a couple of media events since our December board meeting. They've had to do with the wildfires. Well, again, we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. On page 94, I'll point you out to the bottom of the page, the publications and the graphic design highlights. I've changed this here. In the past, we've simply given you an update on publications that were either completed during the process, the time since the last meeting. We'll talk about things in process or things that are in planning. What we're doing here is we're actually giving you a rundown of all of our publications that we currently have, which number here is 38 of them. You see in the description area what it is. It's either like our 10 tips card, the first item. You can see that some of them are booklets, some of them are brochures, then it shows the language that they're in, and it shows the current publication dates. So hopefully this will be helpful to you as you look to see, when things have been updated and start to get a little bit of understanding of the breadth of the different types of publications that our office puts together.
Rick, can I just ask one real quick question?
Sure.
The top one shows August 2018, so is that an update that's coming?
Yes, in some cases, when we run short on supply, we do a reorder. We look at those opportunities to see if it needs to be updated. In this case, the card hasn't been updated content-wise, but it's been reprinted. So that tells us that we verified that that's been updated, and we know that it's current as far as its content. Okay, moving next over to page 96. Again, we'll just touch briefly on the disaster workshops, only to let the committee know that with our staff of 6 people, one of them is allotted to coordinating our outreach, and that's the majority of her job is the Senior Scam Stopper seminars. And when the disasters happened in October, we knew that probably 3 months down the road, we were going to start looking at doing workshops. So we purposely did not schedule a lot of Senior Scam Stoppers in January and February. That's why you see the list is shorter than normal. We spent a lot of time putting together the workshops and actually beginning to conduct them and set them up. So as we mentioned earlier, Susan mentioned, we've already conducted workshops in Yuba County. We've got them scheduled for March the 14th in Butte County, and we are waiting to finalize dates for our first solo workshops that we're going to be doing in Sonoma County. We're also looking at San Diego County, and we're hoping for some dates in the near future to set up in Ventura County. So the work is beginning. We are now starting to pick up on the Senior Scam Stopper seminar, so we'll be doing a little bit of juggling, but doing the best we can with that. And as I'll mention in the disaster section, we are teaming with a lot of the local local agencies and participating in a lot of the workshops that they're conducting. And then finally, on 97, we move into our employee relations, and you can see some of the things that we're highlighting on our intranet site, which is only accessible by CSLB employees on our network. It's not an outside site. Happy to entertain questions, but that completes the program update.
Are there any committee questions at this time? No? Any public comment on the update? That was me. Thank you.
Sorry, Rick, I have a quick question. On page 85, I was just wondering what sessions is. Is that a hit? Somebody,
Yeah, when the internet kind of started, the hits was kind of the universal thing, but as I understand it, a hit can be anything. You can click on a picture on a page and that'll add up a hit, so that it wasn't really a good, accurate representation. So the sessions are, if you come to our website, that's a session. If you leave and go away somewhere else and you come back later, that's considered a new session. So it's like a visit. And then you can see on that chart there, we have return users and new users. We can tell if they're coming here for the first time or if they're returning and if they've been here before.
Okay. Thank you, Rick. Up next is Agenda Item D, an update and discussion of CSLB's outreach, education, media, and enforcement response to the 2017-18 natural disasters. And Rick will lead us through that summary.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah, this is something that's personal to me and a lot of us here at the board, and it's something that we take our role really seriously about, and I'm happy to be able to report to you on some of the activities. It's been a wild year, and as we kind of talk about in the beginning here on page 101, that 2017 will long be remembered as a year when natural disasters changed the face of several California communities. A year ago, it began with one of the wettest winters in almost 100 years, officially ending one of the worst droughts in state history. And those of us who were here even just a couple of years ago, a lot of our focus was on drought. And then all of a sudden, we started talking about and dealing with flooding. So you saw that we also had a threat of potential catastrophic dam break, which was in Butte County in the summer. And then fall, we had these wildfires. And then again in December, heavy rains, and as we speak, the city of Montecito, just south of Santa Barbara, has been evacuated with fears that there may be more mudslides there. Hopefully it sounds like they may have dodged the worst, and there may not be mudslides this time, but that's still not a definite. So in early January, you can see that it happened when we started seeing floods on rivers in Sonoma and Mendocino counties. We had a dam in Santa Clara County that overflowed its banks, flooding neighborhoods in San Jose. Then we had the dry weather. You can see more than 9,100 wildfires happened during the year, burning more than 1.2 million acres of land. 46 of the wildfires destroyed more than 10,600 structures and damaged another almost 1,300 structures around the state. Then in January, this past January, heavy rains in the areas of Santa Barbara County where the Thomas Fire burned led to a massive mudslide. That destroyed more than 100 homes and damaged 300 more. And there was a separate mudslide in LA County that damaged 40 homes there. Historically, California's wildfire season's been limited to the summer and fall months, but in recent years, with 2017 being the worst, the wildfires have broken out throughout the year, making fires now a year-round occurrence. So what I've included here on page 102, this is a chart that was put together by CAL FIRE, and it just shows you just a little bit of perspective. You saw the way the state's broken down is CAL FIRE has a certain responsibility for state land or state-owned land. The U.S. Forest Service has control over the national parks and any federal land. So there's some situations where wildfires may be burning in federal lands that the U.S. Forest Service is the primary agency on that, or they're in state lands where CAL FIRE would be the primary agency. So the first numbers you see here, the 2017 numbers, the number of fires, this is CAL FIRE related fires. So that's 7,117. If you look at the bottom there, when you combine it, you add another 2,000 fires if you add in fires that were on national federal land. And the number of acres, as you can see, over $500,000 of state land and over 1.2 million acres in the federal lands. And already this year, we have seen, as of February 11th, we've already seen 246 wildfires in the first month plus. Fortunately, the firefighters were able to get quick handles on those, and only 69 acres were burned, so a lot of very small fires. But it's something to keep in mind that, the situation is out there now. We are getting rain. There's a good chance that by time, if it warms up and when it warms up in the spring and summertime, we'll be looking at serious fire situations again. There on 102 and to 103, you see a listing that I got from CAL FIRE of the different fires that either destroyed or damaged structures. And I do need to note that one of them was missing from the list. There was one of the 3 Butte County wildfires that we talked about. The LaPorte fire was not on this list, but it did destroy 71 homes and damaged 2 others and burned 6,151 acres. That was also in October, during the same October 8th and 9th period. So you can just get an idea, and it does give you a little perspective when you look back to see just how devastating the wildfires were and why that really gave us a large challenge in our post-disaster efforts. And it has turned into one of the largest coordinated disaster efforts in our 90-year history, and actually the largest outreach effort since the 1994 Northridge earthquake. And so now we're just going to briefly go through some of the things that the board has done to respond to the disasters. One of the biggest is the relief center staffing. CSLB staffed almost 24 local assistance centers established by the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, or what's called disaster relief centers, which are established by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, in 15 different counties. What happens in a lot of situations when there's a wildfire, if there's a state declaration, then the laws and penalties, which I can talk about, will go into effect. In this case, the fires were so devastating that emergency declarations were requested from the federal government. Many of those were accepted, and then FEMA becomes involved, and they play a big role in the response and the assistance efforts. So they, in some cases, have their own centers, or a center may start off as a local assistance center and change into a disaster response center. As far as we're concerned, the names don't really matter. We're there and we're staffing them, all of those centers, every day that they're open. And in many cases, these are hours away from where we may have staff located. For example, in Sonoma County, we do have an office there, but we have 4 people that are working in that office. So we were staffing the various centers in the North Bay on a daily basis with staff going back and forth from Sacramento. So it was a significant commitment of people. The Relief Center support, Susan did touch on that. The public affairs staff has been integral in making sure that all of these centers had the supplies that they needed, that all of our staff had the supplies they needed. That work actually began probably at least in 2015. We anticipated, future problems, so we created basically tubs of materials, and we actually put them out at field offices. So we spent time a couple of years ago, and we, pre-set up response kits that they could use, and those have really come in handy. But as the size and scope of this, you can see some of the pictures on the bottom of 104, which is my staff, how they did a great job of coming together, because we did have to staff materials, and we calculated they probably put together more than 50,000 pages of materials, educational information, warning signs. We also distributed materials from the Architects Board, and even some of the FEMA materials that we included in areas where FEMA didn't have centers. So a lot of work was done trying to get these places staffed. Either materials were shipped there, and then once the centers were open, we were responsible for making sure they didn't run out of materials. So we were constantly checking in. They were reordering supplies, and so it was a little mini Amazon that we had running here, making sure everybody was supplied. So they've done a great job. Also of note on 105 is we actually had a system and do have a system in place for licensees and applicants who actually were affected by the wildfires. In some cases, their licenses, their certificates may have been destroyed during the fires, maybe their applications, their renewal forms. And so we have waived fees for the different services that we offer to them and the replacement fees. The Boots on the Ground outreach program, we were supported in great extent by the Enforcement Division. People actually going out into the various disaster areas, posting warning signs, walking through the neighborhoods, meeting with the survivors, meeting with licensed contractors who may have been out there, trying to get the word out and seeking their assistance in helping be our eyes on the ground to let them know about the important protections that we have in place, and encouraging them to contact us if they have any evidence or any concerns about unlicensed activity. We also have been responsible for the media outreach. We've literally done dozens, if not into the hundreds of interviews, and we talked earlier about the media events. You can see on page 106 there, I've lost count of how many times I've been in Sonoma County, but we've done a number of things up there. And what I'll do now, and give myself a chance to take a breath, I actually will show you, excuse me, the media coverage from a press conference. We actually did conduct a sting operation actually in the end of January in Santa Rosa, conducted a press conference with the Sonoma County District Attorney. So if you just give me a moment, we'll turn on the projector here and we'll show you just one brief news clip, and then I'll continue.
Illegal contractors and out-and-out. Fox 2 News.
Very important and very helpful information, Tom.
Now cleared. Of the lots now cleared, it looks like illegal contractors and out-and-out scam artists are trying to troll for victims who are doing everything desperately trying to get their building efforts started. The State Contractors License Board looked on Craigslist for ads offering contractor services, but ads that did not provide certain required information, such as their contractor's license number, or they gave licenses that had expired or been revoked. Last Saturday, undercover agents posing as fire survivors met them at the job site. There, the bogus contractors offered bids for framing, electrical, and plumbing services.
We caught a total of 13 people.
Bids for simply framing the 10 by 20 foot room ranged from a very low $850 to a whopping $13,000. Plumbing bids for the small space range from $1,500 to $4,500.
So these are significant bids, well over the $500 limit where you need to have a license. $500.
All will face charges for illegal advertising, but those that actually gave bids face very serious charges of illegally contracting in a declared disaster area.
The penalty is stiffer right now because we are under a disaster declaration, so that it is a felony. It's punishable by a term of imprisonment of 3 years.
Add to that $10,000 fines, 10 times the non-disaster fine. It's a call to residents to be vigilant.
It's really disappointing because overall I've seen the good in people and how people have really pulled together in the most amazing ways. And I'm always a little surprised and taken aback. There's still people trying to take advantage of the situation.
Now that I know that it's happening, give me some pointers and I'll keep my eye out. First thing I'll do is I have a direct line into the dispatcher for Santa Rosa PD, so wouldn't hesitate to call.
The stings are also a warning to scammers.
Don't do what they did, or we're going to come after you.
Now, contractors must put their license number in all of their ads, on all of their vehicles, and all of their business cards, contract and other business documents, and they must carry their state-issued plastic pocket card so that you have the opportunity to check them out online before you make a mistake. And that's true whether it's a disaster or any other kind of contracting. Reporting live, Tom Bakar, KTVU Fox 2 News.
Very important and very helpful information, Tom. Thank you so much.
Thank you. In addition to that, we have issued a consumer alert since our packet was put together. We have a suspected unlicensed contractor operating in the Santa Rosa area, actually leasing office space and doing work. We served a search warrant on his office. In working with the North Bay, there is actually a wildfire disaster task force with the FBI and the district attorney's office. So we did a consumer alert, and we've got a lot of play on that and the word out to the consumers. So there's a lot of things that we've been doing on the media side. Okay, also on page 107, we do have it was kind of featured towards the end of the story there, and we'll talk about it on another agenda item, so I won't spend a lot of time, but we do have a new Find My Licensed Contractor feature on our website that it's got a direct tie because of the wildfires, and we'll talk about that on the next agenda item. On 107, we have mentioned the wildfire workshops. My apologies to Nancy. We have a typo here. We call her Nancy Spring, but I think we all know that it is Springer. It's autocorrect. We have the problems with our texts, and here we go again. But anyway, but Nancy's been instrumental. We've also worked with the Architects Board, with the State Compensation Insurance Fund, and a lot of other local groups, and they've been very receptive, and we look to continue these workshops. The interesting one especially is we are targeting some towards licensed contractors who hope to get work in the fire area, going over some of the main contract requirements and some of the laws that we're hoping they follow. And we're hoping by reaching out to them before they get too far down the road that will help prevent mistakes or situations where they might get in over their heads. So we've had some good feedback from the industry on that, and we're looking forward to continuing that program. And finally, on the bottom of page 108, there's a couple of the different task forces that have been set up that the Contractors Board is part of. One of them that I've been representing the board on is a joint state and federal long-term housing task force. So we've been talking about all the various issues related to that. We've been able to talk about our efforts and to have good interaction with both FEMA and the Office of Emergency Services. And then the Workforce Development Working Group, which Laura has been representing CSLB on, which is being run by the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. And a number of folks from the industry have been involved in those meetings at all, trying to address some of the issues on anticipated shortage of contractors and the workforce as well. So as the workload has taken staff away from their primary responsibilities, the board is committed to protecting the disaster survivors, and we're working hard to absorb all of the effects that we've had because of the time spent on working on disaster response. So at this point, that completes my report on the natural disaster response.
Okay, any committee discussion on this agenda item? No. Any public comment on this item? All right, let's move on to agenda item E, which is the new feature, Find My Licensed Contractor website feature. But I have to interject that this has been rolling out for some time, and I used it the other day. I was like the user when we met with Rick, because my 91-year-old father doesn't want to hire a contractor, and he needs to. He thinks he can do the work and all those kinds of things. And I was able to go in at his computer and log in and to ask for licenses in his area, specifically his city, and 77 of them popped up, and it was like, oh, he lost that argument. But it was really helpful and easy to use, and so please go ahead, Rick.
Thank you. And as with many of the things that the Public Affairs Office does, it doesn't happen alone. We do it in support and in conjunction with other groups within our board. And I want to also take an opportunity to introduce John Cleveland, who's the head of our information technologies. He's going to be able to join us and talk a little bit about the role they played, because that was critically important. We're starting on page 111 here, and I wanted to give you just a very, very brief history of CSLB and the internet. As you can see on 111 there, that's actually our first homepage. We went online on March 15th, 1995. It was a pilot project at first, and I guess they decided the internet was going to be around a while, because here we are now, 20 plus years later. A few months after the launch, we actually began our first license lookup feature, and you can see a screenshot from that on page 112. Way back in the beginning, we actually allowed people to email us, looks like, what is that, up to 5 license numbers, and then we, staff here, did the lookups, got the information together, and then emailed them back. So funny when we think about that now, but that was probably really advanced back at that time. And, eventually, that currently evolved into the automated system that we have now. For a number of years, the board has wanted to go down the road of trying to offer consumers a way to start their search. In the past, we've only, with the license lookup, you had to come to us with either a license number, a company name, or a personnel name, and then we could tell you what the status of that license was, but we didn't give consumers a way to start their search. And so this is something that we've wanted to do for a long time. And actually, legislation did come down, which kind of helped spur us along. It was AB 2486, gave us until January of 2019 to do that. Now, with last fall's wildfires, we did sense the urgency, and we put the project on the front burner to complete. So there was a lot of hard work in the last 3 or 4 months with staff, especially by the IT staff, and we were able to launch the feature on January the 8th of this year. And before we give you a look at the feature, John, if you wouldn't mind just giving us the committee a little bit of an overview of the kind of work that your staff put into this.
Certainly. Madam Chair, Chief Rick, members of the committee, thanks for having me.
Chief Rick, thank you. I like
Chief Rick, well, Arlo.
That's it.
Thank you,
Chief
Chief
Arlo,
John.
I like that better, but thank you for having me. And for security purposes, I won't go into the detailed architecture too much because, quite frankly, you'd be asleep in 10 minutes anyway. But I do want to take just a second to acknowledge the team and the work that they put into this. Between the design, the coding, the testing, the recoding, the retesting, and the implementation, the team spent hundreds of hours. And I just want to thank the team that's probably watching for your efforts. I do want to highlight 2 of the main components that went into this effort. And the first is obvious. It's the coding and the development of the application that you see on the website itself. Secondly, we needed a way to access the data securely, quickly, and cost effectively. So what we did there was implement a data repository that's separate from our main data store so that we could access it quickly. And then obviously a marriage of the application on the website to that data repository so we could tie this all together. So what that data repository does for us is it allows us to just isolate the data elements that we need for this application rather than impacting our data store in the back end. So I think that's about it, and I just wanted to, I know Rick is going to go through a demo and talk a little bit about future features that we've already talked about. So thank you.
Actually, I have a question. How often are the 2 databases synced up?
It's real time.
It
So
is
stays-
real time.
yeah.
Great.
Okay, so on the screen, it's accessed right from our homepage. So if you look on the right side, at the top here, we have our instant license check, which is our long-standing license check. But right below it, you see where it says, Find My Licensed Contractor. So here it is right here. Oh, thank you. Go ahead and hit them both, Mike. That's great. Okay, so when you click on search, the feature comes up, and we can search either by city or by zip code. And so we'll just randomly let's just type in Fresno. And it actually, it feels one of the automated things that they put in there is it helps finish, let's see, gives options of places where we actually have licensees in. And then we have a drop-down list which shows all of our licensing classifications. So say if we want to look for electrical contractors in the city of Fresno. Okay, so right there, we come up with 245. So there's currently 245 licensed C10 electrical contractors in Fresno. Now, one of the things that is also built into the system is this gives a randomly generated list. There was a concern that we didn't want to be seen as giving preferential treatment to, AAA electrical and AAB electrical. So this is a randomly generated list So you can see, so in this case, it starts off with somebody with a T, then an L, then an A, so, and it's random every time. So it's not going to come up, if you did this again, it would not come up with the same order. Now, one of the things that's built into, if for some reason you wanted to see either a alphabetical list, you could do that. You could adjust it by just clicking on name, and it will turn it into an alphabetized list. If you want to, you can also go over to the license number listing. If you wanted to see them changed by that, you can change it that. Well, it can be most experienced, but it isn't necessarily, because there's some experienced ones who, for various reasons, have a higher number. But if that's something that somebody wants to do, they can do that as well.
Or the zip code.
Yes, and they could also do by the zip code. There are various zip codes in Fresno, but if you live in a specific zip code, yes, you could rearrange the list to get it by zip code. When you can click on the individual license number itself, and that will take you to their license lookup page. So you can still do that. The other nice thing about this is you can export the list either into an Excel spreadsheet if you want to, or you can put it into a PDF. So you can also, here, similar if you have a web-based email system, you can highlight certain ones. Let's say that there's let's say there's 3 of them that you wanted to keep and you want to export that list. You can just click on those 3. You can either export it as a PDF or on an Excel spreadsheet. I'll try it as a PDF. I haven't done it on this computer, so I'm hoping we don't have a filter here that'll mess us up. Okay, so there it is. There's the PDF. It's got the 3 that I did. From here, you can still click over and link right to them. And if you decided you wanted to export the entire list, you can click on that. And there you go. There you've now exported the entire list. That's as a PDF. And again, you can also do it into an Excel spreadsheet. So that's kind of the basic features of that. We show here, and it's really important that we have the time stamp on there, because this list was pulled at 10:43, but it's now 10:46. That list is now outdated. So if you went and pulled it again, somebody in the interim may have had their license suspended, or something may have happened. So we wanted to be sure that the people who do that have the information on there that this list is only current as of the time that it was created. Are there any questions or anything anybody wants to see? Sure. Any questions for John, so I can defer on him? No.
No, you're a chief.
Go ahead, Joan.
Oh, okay. Have you had any feedback from people that, about submitting their address and making that public information? Smaller contractors might not be working out of an actual business address, maybe working out of their home.
Well, that information is already public, and it's on our website. So if you do the license lookup for them, you're going to get whatever their address of record is. So we've not heard anything, and it is public record. We're not providing anything that isn't already available to the public. Augie? Jim?
So, you said it every time you click on it, it refreshes it, so it's taken off people who are suspended or expired, right?
It's actually, and as John said, it's updated real time, so it accesses that. So as soon as somebody in our system puts it into our database that license is suspended, any future searches automatically, and this list will only show people who actually have a license that is currently active. It will not, suspended licenses will not show up on these searches at all.
So the Contractors License Board has a seat on the California Uniform Construction Accounting Commission to enforce the act, and there's about 1,000 public agencies that belong to that act. It's within the Public Contract Code. And recently, we have continued to get questions about how do we get information out to licensed contractors, right? And I think there might be an advantage to coming to one of the commission meetings, and if you can do this presentation, you and John do this presentation it's at the State Controller's office. I think that they would be completely blown away by the ability to tell each one of the cities, counties, special districts, schools, they're all represented on this QCAT commission. They're always wondering how to get licensed contractors notified that they need to bid work, because all the work has to be bid, right? Even the informal bidding has to occur, right? And they have to be able to prove that they've gone out to, everybody, right? In other words, so they try to get things from exchanges, from business exchanges and from other places. And this would just totally address the concern that we've had on the commission. So I want to talk to you about.
Thank you, that'll be great, because one of the things by jump-starting this and moving it up to the front burner is we really haven't put a complete communications plan together on starting to publicize this. We definitely will and have started. Our first priority was to make sure that people in the disaster areas knew about that. So in all the presentations and everything we're doing to disaster survivors, we are publicizing this, and we're getting very good feedback. They're very appreciative of this. But yes, one of our goals now is to begin a bigger outreach plan and try to get this. It's going to be a big process because there's very little on our website right now. Right now, we talk about just doing the license lookup. So there's going to have to be a revamping in addition to a lot of stuff on our website. The other thing I wanted to note, too, is our original goal, obviously, is to get this information for consumers, but I think it's also a great feature for the licensed contractors. Many of them might be looking for subs to hire for a certain trade. They'd have the ability to go look up in that close area and get a list of licensed people that they can then look for. So I think there are a lot of potential audiences, and we're very happy about that. Are there any other questions? As far as moving ahead in our long-term plans, thank you. Again, I mentioned that we're going to be looking at putting together a communications plan and to expand the outreach that we're doing. One of the other things that we're hoping to be able to do, too, is to set up some more behind-the-scenes tracking. Right now, we really don't have a great system in place to know how many people are actually building the lists. We believe we know that the page has been accessed about 72,000 times. But that doesn't really tell us a lot. It doesn't mean people may have just come across it. It doesn't tell us that they've done that many searches. So we're going to be looking to build something in that can help us better track. Maybe it might be able to tell us geographically where these searches or what kind of searches they're looking for. So there's a lot of information that we're hoping to be able to gain to see how people are using the site. Other things we're going to be looking at doing is expanding the options. Right now, you can either search by city or the zip code. In this case, if you search by a zip code, it's only going to give you the contractors in that zip code. We're going to look to be able to put a feature in there where you can put maybe a radius. Say I want to find all the contractors within a 25-mile radius or a 50-mile radius of this zip code to give them some options. So we want to build that in hopefully as a future feature and just to give them other options. And long-term, though, we do want to look at having some kind of a system where licensees can have some kind of an account where they would be able to tell us additional information, because one of the shortcomings of this system is, as we kind of noted here, it's based on a contractor's address of record with the board. And for a vast number of contractors, they are going to usually work in an area fairly close to where their address of record is, but there are a number of companies that either operate statewide or operate in multiple counties and multiple cities, and this is not as beneficial for them as we would hope it would be, because they're not going to show up in searches. We actually had a case where we introduced this up in Loma Rica, and we had a contractor that said, yeah, I don't show up in a search for Loma Rica, even though it's a very small community. He lives in another community about 5 miles away, but if somebody did a search for Loma Rica, he would not come in on that search. In other cases, there might be companies that may be based, let's say, in Sacramento, but they do work in Placer County and El Dorado County and Yolo County and maybe even San Joaquin County. They would only show up in the searches for Sacramento. So by enabling them to have some sort of an account where they can tell us the areas where they service, we would hope to be able to add that feature in so they can show up in more searches if they do work there, and to widen the ability of contractors to show where they're working, and also enable the consumers to be able to have a bigger pool of contractors that they can consider. That concludes our presentation.
All right. Thank you, and thank you to everyone putting that together. It's the kind of thing that we'll be able to roll out, and it will be it's really being responsive to all those questions that have come in and requests. Is there any committee discussion on this item or public comment on this item? So the next item is item F, an update on applicant and industry outreach regarding the board's licensure process. And Chief Rick, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Susan. In November of 2017, CSLB launched a new program of workshops to assist potential and likely license applicants. The workshops are designed to review the benefits of getting the license, providing an overview of the licensing requirements, and explaining the steps involved in getting the license and being able to answer general questions about the licensing process. The workshops that have been set up are conducted in both English and in Spanish. Been very well received and gotten good feedback from the attendees. The inaugural workshop was held here in this room in Sacramento on November 17th of 2017. We had 32 people in attendance. As you can see, the attendance is jumped up. We now get between 50 and 70 people. It's done on a monthly basis here in Sacramento. And then in January, we actually expanded that after issuing an industry bulletin, and it was expanded to our Norwalk office as well. So in January in Norwalk, about 50 people attended. In February, 68 people attended the English language workshop, 35 the Spanish language session. And so these are now continuing on a monthly basis on, I believe it's the second Friday in Sacramento, the third Friday in Norwalk. And hopefully we plan future expansion, maybe be able to include live interactive webcasts, so to make it even more approachable and accessible for people in different parts of the state if they're not close to either Sacramento or Norwalk. As far as promoting them, right now they are promoted on our CSLB website, which most attendees tell us that's where they've learned about it. We've also got flyers to promote the workshop available to both our Northern and Southern SWIFT. They distribute it to unlicensed contractors that they come across when it's appropriate. And also of note for the committee is on March 20th that we'll join DCA's Office of Public Affairs, and we'll be conducting a Spanish language workshop at the Mexican Consulate in Los Angeles. A similar event back in August of 2016 had more than 150 people, so we're looking forward to that event as well.
All right, thank you.
If I can just make a comment, I'd just like to acknowledge Kayla Bosley, that's one of the instructors for the workshops, and thank you for making that happen.
Good. Any other comments from the committee, questions, and from the public? Our next item is the strategic plan update, which I see Claire, the left margin has still confounded us. Yeah, we all had an IT background, and we could not get this table to work right. However, the content is perfect. And I'd like to turn this over to Rick.
And the spell check worked on this one too, so we're good.
Great.
Okay. I'll just quickly go through it. The status things on item 4.1, that's been completed for a while now, and because of our strategic planning that's coming up at our board meeting next month, obviously this will all change with the new one. But item 4.2, the layout has been finished. We're in the process of printing. This is our new consumer flagship publication. Item 4.3 is our publication for the applicants and journeymen. That has been approved by legal. We are currently doing the layouts and getting that ready to send to the printer. Item 4.4, which is our contractor publication, is currently with DCA Legal and is undergoing review there. Item 4.5 is the new licensing application video. We are developing that script. Things on that, it fell down to a little bit of a lower priority based on the disasters, but we have made progress on that, and we are working on that. We are also in the process of working with the licensing division on the development of a new, easier-to-use application. So we are going to have this done in the very near future, and then working towards a longer new application that's happening as well. The script is also being developed on 4.6. You can see there's a deadline of June of 2018. We are still confident that we'll be able to meet that deadline. You can see 4.7, this is actually what we just talked about. This is the Find a Contractor website feature. That is now completed. And item 4.8, expanding the Scam Stopper program, that's kind of an ongoing, we do have a June 2018 deadline for that, but we're always looking for opportunities to expand that program, and that is in progress.
So Rick, on 4.5, do you have a new date that you'd like to propose so that we could have a motion to accept that? Since we're not going to be done December 2017.
Can I rub my hands together? Okay, let's. Yes, if we want to propose a new date, I would suggest that we propose, let me look at Claire.
I don't want to look at Ashley.
Yeah.
When I talked to Ashley about it, she thought it would be done by the April board meeting, so we could go April 2018.
Okay, let's be safe and let's make it May, if that's okay with the
Okay.
the committee, but,
So I would move to accept that change to May 2018 for section 4.5.
Second.
And I think, can we take a vote?
you have to have any public comment?
Oh, any board comment, committee comment, or public comment? All right, let's vote.
Okay, I don't know who.
Okay, Susan Granzella. Aye. Augie Beltran. Linda Clifford.
Aye.
David De La Torre.
Aye.
Joan Hancock. Michael Layton.
Aye.
Okay, so the motion carries, the vote is unanimous.
Thank you, Kayla. So that concludes our business for today. Are there any comments from the committee or from the public?
Motion to adjourn, Chair.
That was fast. And so since we have a second, let's take a vote.
Okay, Susan Granzella.
Aye.
Augie Beltran.
Aye.
Linda Clifford.
Aye.
David De La Torre.
Aye.
Joan Hancock. Michael Layton.
Aye.
Okay, so the motion carries, vote is unanimous.
Thank you very much. We are adjourned.